Longtime viewers of the show know that I've been critical of J.K. Rowling for a very long time, and this is because I believe that her obsession with trans people is not only weird, but extremely harmful. It's not like she's saying these transphobic things into the void. She is basically non-stop dogging on trans people, attacking gender-affirming care, making it seem as if they're inferior to her audience of millions and millions of people. And when you have a platform that large, what you say holds a lot of weight. So maybe somebody who wasn't necessarily predisposed to not like trans people might start saying transphobic things because they respect you and they're a fan of yours. So I've been critical of her, as have thousands of other people, and it seems as if this criticism has led to her writing a book. And when we look at the book in question, perhaps there should be a page in there where you see my name as well as Vaush's name in the dedication section specifically for inspiration, but I'll let you decide. Let's look at this particular book here. So Cheyenne Browntree of the Rolling Stone writes, although J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series was rooted in fantasy and make-believe, the author seems to be drawing inspiration from something a little more realistic for her latest book, her own life. Rowling's new novel, The Black Ink Heart, part of her crime thriller series, Cormoran Strike, and penned under the pseudonym Robert Galbraith, involves a storyline that appears to mirror Rowling's public downfall after she continually made statements that have been widely condemned as transphobic. In her new book, Rowling introduces readers to Eddie Ledwell, a creator of a popular YouTube cartoon who sees internet trolls and her own fandom turn on her after the cartoon was criticized as being racist and ableist, as well as transphobic for a bit about a hermaphrodite worm. The creator is doxxed with photos of her home plastered on the internet, subjected to death and rape threats for having an opinion, and was ultimately found stabbed to death in a cemetery. The book takes a clear aim at social justice warriors and suggests that Ledwell was a victim of a masterfully plotted, politically fueled hate campaign against her. So what's the overall message of this book? The message is that it's not necessarily the oppressed who we should worry about. It's the oppressors. They're the ones who are actually oppressed. And the individuals who are spewing hate, well, they oftentimes can be the victims of hate to the point where they could be killed. Now look, it's fiction, perhaps loosely based on reality, but the overall message is to essentially portray people who are concerned with racism, concerned about ableism and transphobia as the real bad guys. So this is kind of mirroring her own experience. She's often portrayed herself as the victim, so it's obvious that Eddie Ledwell, is very similar to her. She's obsessed with trans people. It's so weird. Now, she claims that this is not actually based on her life. And I don't believe her. Many people don't. But she says that she actually wrote the first draft before she was called out for transphobia. So it's simply a coincidence. Sure, Joanne. I don't believe her. I don't think many people believe her. But the book gets even more strange. So Nathan J. Robinson tweets, I realize J.K. Rowling's new novel might seem a little long at 1,200 pages, but a good portion of the space is taken up by fictitious mean tweets. So as you can see, there's plenty of examples here, but there's more. So here's a sample page from the novel where indeed it's just basically mean tweets. He adds, this is what happens when a novelist spends too much time on social media. Now, I've got to ask the question, as somebody who reads a lot of novels, who would want to read that? Like, I read almost every night before I go to bed. I can't imagine enjoying that. Like, who would want to read mean, fake tweets? I mean, look, and she pretends like she's the victim here. No, you got criticism because you're saying hateful things. We all see hate tweets. If you have a Twitter account, you're going to see mean tweets, hateful tweets. But in this instance, it's not like people were just being mean to her, assuming that she did write this book, about herself. It's not like they were just mean to her because, we all just hate J.K. Rowling. No, it's the content. It's what you say about trans people that's damaging. Now, let's go back to why I said at the beginning of this video, perhaps myself and Vaush should be in the dedications page because she saw some mean tweets, and specifically she saw my mean tweet. So here's what I said about my back and forth with J.K. Rowling back on April 4th. So she wrote, "History will judge whether Dr. David Bell was a hateful transphobe or trying to alert people to a medical scandal, but he's far from the only health professional raising these concerns, and I have the letters and emails to prove it." Now, we're not going to get too deep into his arguments here, but basically, in essence, his argument is that these doctors, they are too flippantly diagnosing young people with gender dysphoria. Perhaps they're just gay or lesbian and not actually, experiencing gender dysphoria. On top of that, he claims essentially that more trans people are getting this diagnosis, or more autistic people are getting this gender dysphoria diagnosis. So suggesting that autistic people are being taken advantage of. Nice ableism there, by the way. No, actually, this isn't really an issue. People who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, by and large, that's a correct diagnosis. So let's actually look at some facts really quickly here. So 97% of trans people are happy with their transition. And in the UK, J.K. Rowling's country, the regret rate is 0.47%. I repeat, 0.47%. So doctors are overwhelmingly getting their diagnosis of gender dysphoria correct, but he's pretending as if this is some big issue when it's not. Now, the reason why he's claiming this is an issue and he's fashioning himself as a sort of whistleblower is because he's anti-trans, quite literally. This is an anti-trans charlatan who doesn't think that kids should get gender-affirming care. He's in lockstep with Republicans in the United States. And people politely responded to J.K. Rowling and tried to point this out. For example, Aaron wrote, "Joanne, you are literally pushing a conversion therapist. He belongs to an organization calling for 100% detransition, that calls each youth who goes on to transition a failure, that seeks to eliminate youth transition, that calls HRT opposite sex imitation medicine." Now, this person noted that he lacks the credentials that he claims to have. Bell has not actually worked clinically with trans people. He has no relevant expertise. He was a staff governor with no clinical involvement and is facing disciplinary procedure. So ask yourself this question: why wouldn't J.K. Rowling tweet out the peer-reviewed studies that show that gender-affirming care for young people saves lives? It's medically necessary. It reduces rates of depression and suicidality. Why would she tweet out this one quack who's a bigot? It's because he's confirming her transphobic point of view. Now, people try to engage respectfully. For one, I don't engage respectfully with transphobes and homophobes because I'm of the belief that civil rights are not debatable, even though it technically is debatable in certain countries politically, but I don't think that they're debatable. So my goal is to just insult them until they shut the fuck up, and I want to make it socially unacceptable for bigots to speak their mind. I want them to keep their bigotry, their transphobia, their racism, their misogyny to themselves. So I usually don't try to engage respectfully. I just insult them and I move on. So I tweeted this to J.K. Rowling: "You're a repulsive bigot. Go fuck yourself, transphobic trash." Now, shockingly, she saw that tweet and she decided to screen cap it, and she put me on blast, responding saying, "Me shares video of experienced psychiatrist," that's wrong, "who turned whistleblower, expressing his deep concern at high numbers of autistic children and children with internalized homophobia presenting at gender clinics. Them," and then she shares my tweet, letting her 14 million followers know where to find me. And find me they did. But before we get to that, my response was not indicative of most of the responses that she received. Sure, there were people that were just calling her a transphobic bigot, but there were people there who actually tried to engage respectfully, but she just bypassed them and went right to my tweet. Why is that? Well, it's because this crybaby wants to be perceived as the victim. Great point, Mike. And now she's writing an entire book on her perceived victimization. It's just embarrassing and pathetic. It is. Now, look, if we want to take her at face value and believe her that this isn't actually a book about her, okay, I don't believe her personally, but, keep that into, take that into consideration rather. But just to give you a little bit of an update, so after she responded to my tweet and put me on blast, I got mass reported because of what I said to J.K. Rowling. But not only was I not suspended because my tweet did not violate Twitter's terms of service, but now I'm verified. So it seems like I was the winner in this exchange overall. All she did was signal boost me. And I wasn't the only one, because about a month earlier, or less than a month earlier actually, she did the same thing with the Vaush tweet. And I talked about that. I won't play a clip of that, but I'll link to that down below if you want to see my video on Vaush's exchange with J.K. Rowling. But I just love that she is writing a book now because she's received mean tweets. Presumably. Again, we can take into account what she said, but we don't have to believe what she said, as I don't. Now, look, do I actually believe that she's basing this book off of Vaush and my mean tweets to her? No, I'm not that narcissistic, right? But I do believe that this is probably based, at least loosely, off of the thousands of people who have criticized her for her transphobic views. I think that everybody sees through it. Everybody sees through it. Even like her previous books, if you watch ContraPoint's video on J.K. Rowling, where she read J.K. Rowling's book under the same pen name, Robert Galbraith or whatever, like her book was about a serial killer who dressed as a woman or something, like trying to prime people to believe that trans women pose a threat to women. Like, she constantly writes about trans people. Now she's writing about how somebody who said bigoted things was the victim of a hate campaign, not that they participated in hate themselves. So she's constantly like trying to make her own art about herself now, and she's falling off. Like, nobody cares about you. You're not a victim because you got mean tweets. We all get mean tweets on Twitter. You are getting criticized, rightfully so, because you're saying horrible things that is leading to discrimination against a marginalized group of people. So, keep writing a book about this. I just view this as cope, but it's embarrassing because, like, she is a multimillionaire and she literally lives in a fucking castle, but she can't stop obsessing over the mean tweets. Log off, J.K. Rowling, log off, touch grass.
When you acting like a beta.